Who are the exciting sort of pioneers of that future? It's entrepreneurs. They're able to see the world in ways that aren't maybe obvious or seem wildly optimistic, and then they go do it. Perplexity definitely passes what I call the grandparent test. I showed this to my grandfather and he really loves it and he uses it now. I'm like, okay, that's how you know something is gonna go mainstream. In the future, companies will have like swarms of essentially digital employees. I think the largest beneficiaries of Gen AI and AI productivity are actually going to be small businesses and solopreneurs. If you're an engineer that doesn't understand LLMs, you will probably become obsolete. Human judgment is going to be essential, especially in reviewing the output of Gen AI applications. Two is taste.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Creator Tool Show. Today, we have the honor of having Anne Bordetsky, a prolific investor in the Valley, in Silicon Valley. If you don't know, Anne has been an investor in companies like Perplexity, 12 Labs, Glacier, and actually Contra as well. And so today we're going to interview Anne and ask her, like, where's the world going? What's going to happen with AI? What's going to happen with the future of work? So with that being said, Anne, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ben, for having me here. I'm very excited to finally do a pod together. I feel like we've been talking about this for a long time, and I'm glad we're finally making it happen.
We really have. And it's funny, like whenever I first met Anne, she was almost like had the exact same vision for Contra that we did. And I think, Anne, you were potentially thinking about working on a similar idea, but you're like, you know what? I think I would rather invest in the next set of founders. But it was really inspiring to kind of hear your vision and then like combine that with a Contra vision. And I think what we've been able to build together has been something really, really compelling, in my opinion, obviously. But I would love to hear more about your background. How did you get into venture? I'd love to hear about your background as an operator as well.
Actually, fun fact, I will get to my background, but fun fact about Contra, because you reminded me of this moment. I think I've always had sort of like a list that I keep of and constantly add to, subtract from of company ideas, because you just encounter things through your own experience. I'm like, oh, why doesn't this exist yet? And I remember right before we met, I was noodling on this idea of like, how do we learn from the incredible success of Uber in creating this global platform and legitimizing gig economy work and apply that to knowledge work? Because people crave independence. They crave autonomy. They want to be able to have flexible work and leverage their skills and kind of be their own boss. And so what would it look like to create a platform that allowed high skilled knowledge professionals to be able to build their own business, manage their own clients, et cetera. And I was definitely noodling on the idea because I think it had so much potential. And then I ran across Contra and I was like, oh my God, Ben is already building this exact company. And so then we met and then we invested and lots of other things have happened. But I do think there is a little bit of serendipity of like, I think having a shared vision and meeting at the right time to be able to collaborate and work together.
It was so crazy to I was talking to an investor like yourself. Obviously, I'm in like full pitch mode setting the vision. And then you're like pitching it back to me with like better ideas. You already have like product ideas to contribute. You already had your own kind of vision of what this could be. And I think that was probably the only time that's ever happened to me before. And I think Gaius was like the same boat. Like my co-founder Gaius was like, this is amazing. We have to work with Anne. And so, the rest is history. But, going back to like your experience as an operator, how you got into startups, I'd love to dive in there and hear more about your background.
Yeah, happy to share. So obviously today I'm an investor. I'm a partner at NEA. NEA is a global venture capital firm. We invest in early stage companies, primarily, but really like all across the board, like companies that are using technology in novel ways, and are building, entirely new categories of companies. But I think the reason that I ended up in venture doing this, is because, I spent about 12, 13 years in venture-backed startups, like in the trenches of companies that were like category pioneers. The first company ever to build charging infrastructure for electric cars back before, electric cars were inevitable. The first company to ever launch a peer-to-peer marketplace for car sharing in San Francisco, like when we were first just starting to use our mobile phones and mobile apps, right? So I think like a key theme for me in my career has been, finding and then trying to build world changing companies. Because if you build something that is truly disruptive and beneficial for customers, that could be businesses or consumers, like you do kind of get to change the world a little bit. And I think that's always been the driver for me. Like, I like to think that the things that I work on are going to create forward progress, are going to improve the world in some fundamental way. And, I think every company I've been part of, no matter how successful it was sort of trying to do that in its own way. And so, I've been through startups that tried but didn't make it, but set off really important trends that then did ultimately work in tech. But I also had a chance to be part of Twitter and Uber during their kind of hyper growth periods. And these are companies that truly ended up being iconic, consumer companies, brands everybody knows, and that are part of the fabric of how we live our lives, which is kind of the ultimate achievement. It's not just becoming a public company, but it's becoming a part of people's everyday lives in a meaningful way. And I think part of what I think gave me that spark to like why am I like wired in this like really strange way is that my family immigrated to the US when I was 11. I you know I think even before coming into tech, I had this kind of like I just wanted to like make the world better. Like, I don't know why that drove me. I had this missionary zeal, and the first, I think, the first sort of like variation of that was that I went to undergrad. I went to college at Berkeley, and I started taking classes on climate change. And I was like, oh my God, this is so fascinating. Like, huge global problem. It is part science, part geopolitics, part like social science, right? It's got all these different elements. Like, I want to go and work on climate and energy policy. I went to DC. I worked there for 4 years, pounded the pavement on Capitol Hill, passed legislation, obviously with a lot of other people involved, but really tried to influence, federal energy and climate policy. And so, eventually I sort of realized maybe entrepreneurship, maybe tech is sort of a faster way to impact the world than the long arm of policymaking. And so that's how I transitioned into tech. But I think it's always been thinking about like, where's the world going? Who are the exciting sort of pioneers of that future? And that's usually founders, it's entrepreneurs, right? They're able to see the world in ways that, aren't maybe obvious or seem wildly optimistic, and then they go do it. And so I think, part of being an investor is, of course, understanding like how to build a really durable large company, but part of it is kind of dreaming alongside, I think, founders, because I just think entrepreneurship is sort of the best medium that we have as a society to create forward progress.
That's so crazy. I had no idea that you worked in DC. I had no idea that you were influencing climate policy. That makes a lot of sense seeing like some of your investments now. But it seems like you've always been a trendsetter. You've always been picking trends along the way and understanding what these kind of fundamental societal shifts are going to be. I mean, I'd love to talk about your investment in Perplexity because that has to be one of the hottest AI companies on the market right now. I use Perplexity all the time. It's an amazing search product. I'm curious, like, how did you have the insight into make this investment? And then where do you see the trends kind of coming in the AI landscape over the next like 5 years?
Perplexity definitely passes what I call the grandparent test. So, when you're sitting next to a friend, which I was last week, uh, and literally like friends on both sides of me were like, oh, like I showed this to my grandfather and he really loves it and he uses it now. I'm like, okay, that's how you know something is going to go mainstream. It's the grandparent test. Can you get your grandparents or elder parents to use it? So look, I think with Perplexity, credit to the incredible team behind it for taking the company to where it is today. It is by far one of the fastest growing, AI companies right now and of this kind of era. But I think the core insight that drove us to both identify and ultimately invest in Perplexity so early is that, one, once ChatGPT sort of had its moment and broke through the zeitgeist, it became very obvious that, LLMs in particular and generative AI more broadly was going to give us an entirely new set of tools to really change how we interact with the internet, how we interact with information, and using AI on our behalf to understand, synthesize, and collect information for us on the open web in ways that are far more productive and useful than what we've been able to do before with a standard search. And so, we were already sort of like searching kind of in a way for the right kind of like approach to that. And when we saw the first version of the product, like it already had that spark, that little bit of product magic, I would say, that's so important in consumer, where you use it and you're like, whoa, this is delightful. This is better. This is like radically simple in a way that I couldn't even imagine until I used the product for the first time. It's like taking that first Uber ride, right? You're like, wow, like, okay, I didn't know it could be this good. So I think ultimately we were the lucky ones as investors in that we did get to sort of meet the team early and partner with them on the Series A. I'm so glad they chose us. But, I think Perplexity is rethinking search, rethinking how we interact with information, and how to build an entirely new category of product, which I think in the future will be the knowledge assistant, right? Thinking about how to adapt software that adapts to us versus us having to adapt to software as it is. And that is truly the promise of Gen AI more broadly, is the ability to personalize user experiences and have personal agents that do what we want to do versus the world we've been living in software for the last, 10, 20 years, which is like, hey, here's a UI, take it or leave it. You better learn how to use it, but it's not going to be, personalized to you.
It's crazy that you were so early on that. And I think, there's a ton of trends that are coming around with AI. Like, I think one of the big fears that people have is like, hey, are we all going to be replaced? Are our jobs going to be completely automated? And I'm curious, like, where do you see like AI intersecting with the future of work? Where do you see these trends kind of extrapolating 5 years out? I know it's almost impossible to predict, but I don't know. You've done a pretty good job so far. So I'm curious, like, your thoughts on how this is going to shape early career professionals, like the way we all do our work every day.
It is really hard to predict, but I think some things are in a way inevitable. It's just hard to predict the timeline and the specifics of kind of how it happens and who benefits and who maybe loses. But I think there will be winners and losers, of course, as there are in any technology wave. But some of the things that I think are inevitable is, one, in the future, companies, businesses, organizations will have like swarms of essentially digital employees, right? We could call them agents, we could call them digital employees, but it's the ability to have, lots of like micro tasks performed by AI agents that just make us a whole lot more productive, right? Imagine a company that actually is working 24/7, even if nobody's in the building, because these agents are performing, tasks overnight, right? They can actually connect and communicate with each other to complete work products, right? To complete entire workflows. And, not only would that make businesses more efficient, it makes individuals more efficient. Like I can go home and have dinner with my family, and I don't know, maybe my AI agents are doing part of my job for me while I'm like out with friends, right? And so I think this idea that we're now going to have, you know, armies, platforms of micro agents is really, really exciting. I don't think it's going to replace people, but it is going to make companies and individuals radically more productive. I think some variation of that is inevitable. I think the second shift that we're going to see is turning services into software, right? So taking potentially hourly work and that could be graphic design, that could be dubbing videos right into different languages, and now being able to use largely software in order to do that. And I think with services to software, there's actually two things that are going to happen. Like some things will get productized, and then businesses will be paying for an output of work versus an hour of labor. I also think it's possible that a lot of services businesses will be able to use AI to become just so much more efficient. Um, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think one kind of interesting debate that happens is, who ultimately benefits from AI. And there's a lot of fear mongering, I think, around like, oh, AI is just going to take all the jobs. But I have two predictions on that front. I think the largest beneficiaries of Gen AI and AI productivity are actually going to be small businesses and solopreneurs. Small businesses historically have not had the manpower of a large organization. They don't have huge sales teams. They don't have huge marketing teams. They can't afford that. They don't have people in their back office. And now they're going to be able to use either AI software or agents, right, to perform a lot of those tasks. So I get very excited by the idea that we might actually be able to save small businesses, save brick and mortar businesses, because now we're going to give them digital employees that they weren't going to have before. And that gives them superpowers to do more. And, I think that like opportunity to make small businesses more successful is out there with AI. But the same could be true for solopreneurs, right? Like the people who are on Contra, people who are independents, who the beautiful thing about being independent is you're like unconstrained by whatever applications your company may or may not use. You can use any tool that you want. And so there's a huge opportunity for solopreneurs to use Gen AI tools and products to do more with their skills, to increase their earning potential, to manage the back office for their company, whatever it is. But kind of the individual as a company starts to really work when you can rely on AI assistants to do kind of the services of running a business and running an organization.
I totally agree, and I'm so optimistic for that future. I feel like a lot of people look at it so zero sum, where they're like, "Oh no, like the skill that I have today is going to get replaced by AI." But like we always see that when efficiency enters the market, the demand for like new things always just explodes. So, for example, I was talking to Chris Levins, the VP of Creative at Age of Learning yesterday, and he produces games and he has to produce a lot of assets for games. Now he can have one of his illustrators basically make a stylistic game asset, and then AI can actually extrapolate that into all of the other mundane things that they need. For example, he needs to make the alphabet in a certain style. He can basically stylize the letter A and have AI do A through Z. But that's not actually that great of a job for a creative. Like you're just gonna like basically replicate the style across a bunch of letters. That's not what humans are best at. That's not like the full potential of our creativity. And so I think that it's always like a moving flag post of like what excellence is as a company. There's always an edge that you need to maintain in order to be competitive, to cut through the noise, to be competitive with your marketing, your sales, your creative, your product, whatever it is. That's just going to become the bar is going to raise. And then all of these things that like we have to basically repetitively do today, all these mundane tasks are going to be automated through AI. And then like what excellent is, what that edge is just going to go higher. And the demand for new skills is going to increase. So I think people who are worried about AI taking their jobs, they should probably just think about like, hey, how do I utilize this, upskill, and become the best at using AI so I can explore the next vector of competition. I can explore the next like version of excellence. What is my edge? And I think companies are going to have to adapt. And I think the demand for creativity is going to explode now that a lot of like the mundane tasks are going away. So I totally agree with you. I guess like what advice would you have to creatives and like I guess like independents or just like your average person who's entering the workforce today? What advice would you have for them in terms of like upskilling and staying relevant in today's job market?
I would say more broadly, and this because it's true for so many different professions, like adapt or become obsolete is a huge challenge for any profession in our modern world. It's even true for VCs, right? Like if I don't wrap my head around what, Gen AI is, how it works and what its potential is, like I will become irrelevant as an investor, right? If you're an engineer that doesn't understand, LLMs and, how to work with foundation models, like you will probably become obsolete, right? So I think in general, there's always, because new technology is always coming on the scene, like we just have to embrace a growth mindset in terms of like, I have to adapt and I want to be at the forefront of my profession versus, in the back end and becoming obsolete. So I don't think it's only true for solopreneurs and independents, but I do have some advice. One is don't read the headlines, play with these tools, experiment a lot. When, I think for a lot of clients right now, they probably are feeling really like confused or unsure about how to use new Gen AI applications, how to use these new creative tools and the value that can be created with that. If you can be the bridge to say, hey, now with Midjourney, now with Recraft, now with Modify, now with, insert your Gen AI creative tools, Suno for music. Like, here are things that we can do for you that couldn't have been done before. And by the way, we'll do it faster and better, and save you time. Like, whoa, that's a huge win for a client or for a business that you're serving. And so, one is like, be a thought leader, experiment, figure out ways to make these new tools truly valuable for your customers, and then educate your customers on it, right? And so you become the trusted sort of thought partner, not just the project delivery mechanism for making use of Gen AI. And then I think there is a need to always develop new skills, right? And so I think that if you can sort of be one of the first in your profession or your area to have these skills, it's going to give you an edge. And, I don't know that there's any secret sauce other than, embrace it and assume it's going to work and figure out how you can maximize value for yourself and your clients with these new applications.
100%. I feel like not using AI in your workflows is like not using Loom or not using the internet or like not understanding cloud computing.
Right.
It's going to become table stakes. I think it already is. I mean, even at Contra, like we have so much content moderation we have to do. There's so much anti-spam work we have to do. And that was all manual up until GPT-3. And the moment that we had API access, we started automating a lot of those workflows. And now, like, we're not all of a sudden saying like, oh, we need less people at Contra. It's like, no, like these mundane tasks are automated. How can we do more? How can we raise the bar? Like, how can we move faster on other parts of the business that require more human creativity? How do we make this like a better experience? And so I think across the board, businesses are going to raise the bar for what quality means and what they actually want to be able to achieve. That's not going to go down because of AI. That's going to grow exponentially. So I think there's going to be a demand for these new types of skills, and like the way we exchange value is ultimately going to change as well. Like what skills are valuable today might not be valuable tomorrow because of AI, but there's going to be a new set of skills that you can learn and adapt to that are going to be even more valuable than I think we realize today. And I think what's that, it's like 60% of jobs today weren't around 30 years ago. That's just get that the time is compressing, right? The next 5 years, who knows if we have like everything just looks so different, but that's exciting. And I think that's the mindset people should kind of take when it comes to adopting these tools.
For independents and solopreneurs, but more broadly for all professionals, I'd say like there's three things that AI is not going to do. And I think we all need to have the confidence of like, no, no, this is why we're still going to be relevant, even when we're all using, AI sort of native applications to the same extent we use, I don't know, Gmail today, right? Or like name any product that like we literally can't live without. One is human judgment, right? It is like that body of experience that you have as a human and as a professional that you can take in a lot of different variables and make a great call on behalf of your customer or your partner or your client, right? Like human judgment is going to be essential, especially in reviewing the output of Gen AI applications. Two is taste. For in the creative world, like taste and being a tastemaker is everything. Yeah, you can get a mid-journey image, but is that like the right kind of like aesthetic? Is it pushing the envelope of creative work? Like only a human can decide that. And I think Rick Rubin has that beautiful book, The Creative Way, which really looks at a human being as like the medium, for creative work. And I just don't think that can be replicated in any foundation model. Sorry, like not going to happen. Taste is going to be, humans are going to be the arbiters of taste. And that's not going to change. And third, collaboration, right? Like really truly the work of most professionals is knowing how to work with people, knowing how to build teams, work in teams. Again, AI can't do that for us. And so there's a lot of things that are really valuable about being human that I think just aren't is not going to be replaced with AI. And that's why I don't fear it. I'm like, just give me more. Like I would love to be more productive and more creative. And I have zero fear about, being totally replaced by a machine.
So you're a trendsetter. You've picked a lot of great companies. So we have Perplexity, we have 12 Labs. What other tools are you super excited about? What other tools should creatives know about? Should just normal professionals know about? What do you have your eye on in the market?
I absolutely love, like for music, I love Suno. This idea that anyone can become a musician or like riff like a musician, so I think synthetic music is incredibly exciting, whether you use it for work or for fun. Like I can create any song with any lyrics. Like I just love that. It feels totally magical. So Suno for music. I would say I think 11 Labs is doing absolutely incredible work right now for both consumers and businesses to turn content into your native language, right? To help you read and listen to content, with really engaging voices, right? This idea that you can now pick any voice to really personalize an experience, make it more local and relevant to you is really, really powerful. Genmo and Pika, both in their own ways, are making it possible for people to just create short form films, short form videos that are entirely machine generated. It still feels like the Wild West where like we don't really know what we can do with it yet. But the mere fact that you can like take an idea, turn it into a prompt, and then see it come to life instantly in a video is really wild and wonderful. And we'll see what people do with it. Um, I think that there's a lot of opportunity in like building personal assistants. Haven't seen one yet that's quite right. I think the team that's building Dot or New Computer, super interesting, right? This idea of like an assistant that learns about you and can engage in conversation with you and just be this awesome sidekick in your personal life. So one tool I really love, and this is something that you can really use at work, is Sana AI and Sana Labs, because what Sana is doing is they're actually making it easier to have really engaging employee content within companies. And if you've ever been in charge of learning and development for your company, training, et cetera, or just having like a really great place where employees can go and like find the information that they need, they make that truly delightful and beautiful and kind of really streamlined with AI. So love Sana for the workplace. For creatives, one tool that I'm really paying a lot of attention to is a product called Modify, which is making motion graphics really easy to create in a way that's hard to do in existing tools like Adobe and others. So it's kind of the next generation of graphic design, motion kind of graphic tools. Check it out, Modyfi. We love the company and they're using a lot of generative AI under the hood. And then, for the business teams out there, there are so many sales enablement, marketing enablement tools right now. Go check out Unify, GTM, check out Tofu, top of funnel, Tofu, check out like Nooks, right? Like you can build an army of sales agents with these tools. You can do account based marketing to personalize information for like thousands of accounts. for your campaigns, right? And just really like, give superpowers to your sales organization. So the cool thing about Gen AI tools is whether you work in finance or sales or marketing or graphic design or, even compliance and trust and safety, like there is a tool out there today that is making your job and your profession so much better and so much easier. Like go find it.
It's so true. I'm so optimistic about what we can actually work on as humans. Like, it's not going to be these mundane, like repetitive tasks. We're actually going to be able to explore what it means to be strategic, to develop taste, like you were saying, to actually like bring the human element to this kind of like digital world of work that was supposed to, make us work less, but we've all been working more. We all have like more stress. And I feel like AI does have the promise to hopefully allow our jobs to be a bit more enjoyable. I love the example about you having dinner with your family, and then in the background, you have things, maybe AI is doing like research on a company, maybe AI is doing like market research, looking at trends and things like that. So I'm curious, like, did you see the latest announcement from the Procreate CEO? If you don't know Procreate, it's basically an illustration tool that allows like humans to make really nice illustrations really quickly. I think they're iPad native. I think they're meant to be used with like one of those electronic pencils. But anyway, the CEO came out with a video, and it was kind of like, it was definitely buzzworthy. It went viral on Twitter, but he basically showed all of these different screenshots of people saying like, "Hey, when are the Gen AI features coming in? When are you adding AI to Procreate?" He comes on to the video saying like, "Hey, I hate being on video. I'm usually behind the scenes, but," he's like, "I absolutely hate generative AI." He's like, "We are never going to put generative AI into our product." And he's like, the entire foundation behind Procreate is so that like it's always creativity and creation by humans. And I'm curious your take on that, because that's very contrarian in this world of like everyone adding AI features. It seems like this is almost the opposite, or like the anti effect of all of this, and it went viral. So I'm curious, like, how would you respond to that? What's your what's your gut check or your temp check on this type of announcement?
Well, my reaction to that is that's a very defensive kind of stance to take. Like you're definitely playing defense if you're in that mode. You know it's a risk. It's potentially disruptive to your company, and you're hoping that if you
Mhm.
build if you hold it off, maybe it won't happen. I think that's just a tough position to be in. I think of course, like you have to know what's going to create value for your customers. And if you truly believe that Gen AI will create zero or negative value for your customers, like, yeah, maybe that's a valid business reason not to embrace it. But it's quite possible it's just being on the wrong side of history in the sense that, you know, um, Gen AI is kind of inevitable. There's a lot of utility in Gen AI kind of products right now in image and video generation, voice, music, whatever it might be, even LLMs for reasoning. And so I do think, you rather than saying no, it helps to have a curious mind and say, well, what could we do with these tools that it could actually help grow our business, or help us stay relevant to our users and our customers. So I didn't see the video. I don't know the full story, but to me, it sounds like a classic case of like, I don't want to have to deal with it versus doing the hard work of like, how do we adapt to this new reality and actually figure out how to extract value from it?
Yeah, it's such a good point. It reminds me of like the emergence of like the vinyl market after music basically became practically free. I think there's like 100,000 songs released per day. Don't quote me on that, but that basically, supply and demand basically would say that like music is almost worthless. I mean, every new song that's created is not really that valuable. It's more like the brand, it's the distribution, it's the live experiences that are actually generating most of the value. But then like this vinyl market emerged when like we have like MP3s and we have Spotify. And I think there's going to be an interesting kind of world where some of this stuff stays relevant. We're like, hey, like, no, this is something that like only humans can use. Maybe that's like a long-term business strategy, but I do agree that like they might be missing out on some of the things that they can, some of the superpowers they can actually give their users, and maybe some of their users actually do want to adopt. And I think the next generation of creatives, they're going to be looking for that. It's going to be table stakes. And so I'm curious to see where that goes.
One thing that's really been on my mind recently when it comes to Gen AI is there's so much nuance. It's not black and white, as in like Gen AI is all good and not using it is bad. It's just these are simply Lego blocks, right? For building software, for building user experiences. And so you know, I think that there's a ton of value in looking beyond the headlines, not oversimplifying, and actually like experimenting with these technologies and with the technology and the tools for developers to say, oh, what's possible? Because I think if you get into it and you actually see how hard it is to make something useful out of it, it's a lot less threatening, right? It actually will take people playing around with it, experimenting it, figuring out how to make it useful for other people who are their users and customers for it to go anywhere. And I think when you look at it that way, it's not a threat to your business. It's just a set of Lego blocks. You can choose to use them or not. But I generally like don't advise having an emotional reaction to a new developer tool until you've tried it.
It's definitely leverage. And, like as like a musician and like someone who produces music, I love Suno. I love being able to say like, hey, like give me this genre in this key at this BPM with vocals, without vocals. I use Suno for a case study video. Typically I'd have to make the track ourselves because I want it to be royalty free. I don't have that time anymore. I'm running a company, right? So I can use Suno, boom, it sounds great. And even our team was like, wow, this song's so good. Did you make this? I was like, well, technically, yeah, but it was all AI. And I think like that type of leverage is going to continue to be more and more appealing. So it's almost like you can't close the box, right? Like people are going to accept this as like the norm. And like you kind of either need to keep up or get left behind. And I think, time will tell.
Gen AI will lower the barrier to creativity, right? That is the beauty of Suno and synthetic music is that now anyone can create a song or get inspired by a song and remix it for their own purposes. Maybe just use it as a fun, like social thing with their friends, right? And, in the same way that Canva really democratized creating like beautiful content for your socials, right? It made anyone feel like, oh, I could be like a designer even when I'm not. Like we're going to see that with image and music and other Gen AI modalities. And so I think anytime you democratize creativity, like you get really interesting new both like consumer products but also really empower professionals. And I think especially for independents, like think about all the people that might not have thought of themselves as a creative professional, but maybe with these tools now they'll be able to do things and work with clients and maybe even increase their earning potential in a way that they couldn't have before.
100%. They can create more value in a shorter amount of time than they could before. And clients will pay for that. Clients want that peace of mind. Business owners will pay for that. I think Canva is absolutely killing the Gen AI game. Like we use all of their tools. I think one of my favorites is like their image upscaler. So we can literally take an image from like a video, like take a screenshot, put it into their upscaler, and all of a sudden it's like we took a studio quality image. It's like super crisp. We don't have to like think about Photoshop. It's amazing. And I think that like the fact that they built Gen AI into their tools and they didn't raise prices is just like 4D chess. It's crazy the amount of adoption they're getting from that. And we even hear it from our own users who are just like blown away by like even this like the reskin that they did to their UI recently. But it's really cool to see what's happening there. And like the opposite is like Adobe, who's basically in putting Gen AI into their products, but increasing their prices, like charging for it. So I'm curious, like, what do you think the trend is going to be? Is Gen AI going to be table stakes where it's just kind of built into the existing monetization streams? Or do you think most companies can add Gen AI and charge more?
It's a really good question. I think some of the things that LLMs do will essentially become commoditized and kind of table stakes in different products, right? So, things like the ability to, draft a quick paragraph, right? Or give a couple of examples. Like I think the language component of it, LLMs as a subset of foundation models are so competitive and trending toward commoditization in general already. But the output of that work is also just going to be table stakes, right? Like any application where you're using language, words, writing, etc., will have these abilities. And I think it will be very difficult to command a premium for embedding that into an application. I think it's very different for creative tools, the ability to generate, personalized advertising, personalized marketing, image, video, sound effects, music, like the combination of those things. I think you can command a premium if you productize it in the right way. And so, I think free or, flat pricing is a great way to increase adoption early and to grab market share. But I do think that if you have, use Gen AI to actually dramatically speed up, producing certain content or certain, work product for your clients, or give them like a much more exciting and better campaign, in the same period of time, or maybe localize it to more international markets, right? Like you will command a premium for that. And so I think it just depends on how you use it. But yeah, like if you can create value for your customers, I think customers are always willing to pay more for a better product because there's very clear ROI that you're driving for them. And so, you don't have to give it away for free. You just have to figure out how to create value with it.
I love it. Super well said. Okay, we're almost at time, but I have one last question for you. What trends are you most excited about in technology and in startups now that everyone is building AI into their product? I feel like everyone is an AI company in some ways. So what comes next? Like, what is the next 5 years look like for startups in technology?
One thing I often say is like VCs cannot predict the future. That's truly how I feel. Like I wish I had a crystal ball. I do not. I think this current Gen AI kind of technology wave actually will be playing out for the next 5, 8 years. We're so early in it still. And I think that probably the two things that are on the horizon, beyond sort of the things that we're seeing now, is a breakthrough in agentic capabilities, right? We talk about agents so much, no one's really done it yet. And the existing tools don't work, but there will be a breakthrough in someone figuring out how to build a platform that is essentially a factory of agents for specific workflows, right? So it's this idea of like, I can now build my own labor pool, right? To do the things I needed to do, whatever my business, et cetera, is. Like, no one's done it yet. It's going to be a huge breakthrough when it happens, however it happens. I think probably the other really interesting trend that's taking place, which we don't talk a lot about, which is the rise of new defense technologies, right? So beyond our little microcosm of tech, we live in a really volatile world. There's a lot of geopolitical risk out there. There's a lot of warfare, and there is a part of this tech community that is doing really, really important work to bring both artificial intelligence, but also new manufacturing techniques, new sort of like logistical capabilities to modern warfare that hopefully will ultimately actually be more humane because it's using more machines or more drones and fewer people. And all of that is playing out in the background. And that could actually be very influential in over the next 5, 10 years into sort of the state of the world, and the global, sort of, you know, global stability more broadly. So that's something I enjoy really thinking about, but, I'm not actively investing in myself, but I think is a really important trend within tech right now.
100%. I think the theme is that like AI can make everything from work to defense more humane, not the opposite, right? Like people aren't, attacking people in war, and humans aren't meant to do these repetitive, mundane tasks, and they can truly explore their creativity. I think the future's looking bright. And thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, just thanks again. See you next time on the Creator Tools Show.
Thanks, Ben, for having me. This is super fun.